Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 75 of the Former Action Guys podcast. I'm your host, Justin Kramer. This week I have on Julio Rosas. He's a senior writer over at townhall.com, but he's also a Marine Reservist MAGTF Planner. So we get a little bit into his reserve time. We talk a little bit about that, but he has been traveling and covering the protest across the country since, I think he said his first protest he went to was in Charlottesville, the Charlottesville riots where, you know, the Unite the Right riots, that's what it's called. So he's been doing that since then. I found him on Twitter randomly. I was just looking at protest videos, and I saw his videos from Kenosha, and he was reporting in front of a burning building, and then I realized he had an EGA, an Eagle Globe and Anchor patch on his press plate carrier, or whatever you want to call it, body armor. And I was like, oh shit, this dude's a Marine. So I reached out to him and asked him to come on, and so we can, hear from somebody that's been on the ground about what's been going on in the protests, stuff like that. He was limited on time, so we only get about 45 minutes in, but it's really good information. We're going to have him come back on later on and, do a follow-up, talk about some more. He's continuing to travel to these protests, stuff like that. Really interesting conversation. So, as always, though, make sure to hit up my website, jkramergraphics.com. Hey, on YouTube, thanks for all the subscribers that I've been getting. We passed that 300 mark. The YouTube page is small, it's growing, and I love it. It's pretty awesome to see all the support and stuff like that. I appreciate the people that are spreading the word. And if you could, it's super easy. Just hit that thumbs up button, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and make sure to leave a review if you're on Apple Podcasts, because you're one of the only platforms that can do that. We have hit 85-star reviews in a row on Apple Podcasts. Let's see if we can make it up to 100. So you could be the next person to leave a review there. I'll read it out on the air. And yeah, so as always, hit up those platforms. Hit me up on Instagram at Former Action Guys on Instagram, or at jkramergraphics. All right, and enjoy the episode. All right, hey, welcome, Julio Rosas. Welcome to the Former Action Guys podcast. So I don't know if you had the opportunity to check out the show or anything before, but we normally go through, break down somebody's career and stuff like that. And I happened across your profile. I'm on Twitter because, for those that don't know out there, Twitter is where all the news comes out first, and then it disseminates everywhere else. So I saw the video I actually posted up on my Instagram and my Facebook page, the video of you in front of that fire in Kenosha. And I was like, look at this dude reporting here. And then I saw your patch. It had an EGA on it. And I was like, oh shit, this dude's a Marine. I was like, I got to reach out and see if he wants to come on the show and talk about these protests. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on. I know you're a little short on time and stuff like that. So I'd like to start, dabble a little bit in what you do in the Marine Corps, because I don't even know I know you're a reservist, but I don't even know what you do in the Marine Corps. So I'd like to talk about that just a little bit, and then transition to what you do as a journalist and covering these protests. So if you want to begin and tell us where you're from and why you decided to join the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so I'm originally out of the Chicagoland area, so not the city itself, but I lived about 45 minutes outside Chicago, and grew up around there. Moved from place to place, but generally in that general part of Illinois. Yeah. Terrible state, terribly run.
I know the area. I'm from Lafayette, Indiana. I'm right down the road.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so I actually went to, before I dropped out of college, I went to Indiana Wesleyan University. Okay. And so it's not terribly far from that. And actually, one of my friends is a cop in West Lafayette.
Yeah, good spot.
He went to school there. So I joined the Marine Corps because I was always fascinated. Growing up, I was always fascinated with kind of two things I really noticed looking back on it. And that was, I was really interested in news because, obviously Chicago, the news there is very much about the shootings and all the corruption that goes on in there. So growing up, I would watch the local news channels, and I was just always fascinated by that. But I was also fascinated in military history. When I was very young, my mom says too young now, but when I was very young, I watched We Were Soldiers. I watched Gettysburg, and that scene in We Were Soldiers with them dropping the napalm on their own guys and all that gruesome. So that kind of scared me a little bit, but I was still very much fascinated with just the idea of military history and all that. And so kind of growing up, I was like, okay, I want to join the military, kind of want to do that, but then say, okay, well, which branch? And so I decided the Marine Corps for a couple of reasons, just because I think that just at the base component, Marines kind of have just that legacy and that kind of I don't want to say stereotype, but just more of just kind of being the, the few, the
That esprit de
proud.
corps, man.
Right. That kind of really gung ho type
Hmm.
attitude, and I really enjoy that. And then on top of that, my great grandfather was a Marine on
Oh
Okinawa,
wow.
and he fought. Oh yeah, you want to talk about old core right
Yeah.
there? I mean, he fought there, and he got injured by a Japanese mortar shell, hit him in his left leg, if I'm remembering correctly. So he was sent to the rear. He had to recover, but then once he was all better, he went right back to the front. And then by that time, the campaign was about finished. And he said that he told me that they were getting ready to start, doing the process to invade mainland Japan,
Hmm.
before they dropped the bombs. And he was kind of telling me, "There's like, yeah, if we invaded Japan, I probably wouldn't be alive today."
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the people from that time frame, that was kind of the thinking that Oki is bad. What's mainland gonna be like? Yeah.
Right. And so uh, he lived in Ocean City, Maryland, and so he retired out there. He was one of the first people to actually like get a condo that was like right on the beachfront, because he's from Maryland, so they would always go to Ocean
Hmm.
City before it became the city that it is today. And so he literally had a condo, or he lived in a condo that was literally right on the beach, and it was really amazing. And so he passed away in 2018. And obviously pretty sad about that. But I enlisted into the Marines and I graduated boot camp in 2015. And so during my 10 days of leave, I was able to go out and visit him,
That's
after
cool.
being a Marine. And he was very proud of me. We got pictures and everything. And so that's actually who my memorial bracelet that I'm wearing. That's what I wear for him. Just so I don't forget about him. And given, obviously, I would like to have kept him around, but then with this whole coronavirus thing, because he was in a nursing home,
Yeah.
because physically, for like a 91-year-old who went through hell and
Yeah.
back, World War II, physically he was pretty good, but he was losing it mentally.
Mm. That's
So
unfortunate.
uh, kind of the silver lining with him dying 2 years ago is that he definitely would not have mm, survived coronavirus if he contracted it in a nursing home. So that's kind
Yeah.
of
Did you guys compare?
but
Did,
so
did you
so
guys compare boot camp stories from like old core to what you went through?
Yeah, he would tell me that they would beat the hell out of them. There's drill instructors and all that. I was just like, yeah, they couldn't really touch us. So he would. So he kind of had like that edge on me, and he let me know it, which I thought was
That's funny.
funny. So it was a combination of that and just kind of carried, because then his two sons enlisted into Marines. One went to Vietnam, who then later went on to become a Secret Service agent at the White House, and so it was kind of a family thing.
Yeah.
We kind of skipped a generation with my dad, my stepdad, and so I kind of decided to kind of carry it on with that. So it was just that was kind of the main reason. And so for my job in the Marines, so I was in the reserves. So there was three options for me around that North Chicago at Marine Air Control Group 48. That was my first duty station, quote unquote. Was ground radar repairman. I could do a recon contract if I wanted to do that. But then the third option was Marine Air Ground Task Force Planning Specialist,
Oh, you're a
0511.
MAGTF planner.
Yes. So I initially was like, I'm like, I don't know what MAGTF Planner is, so I know what ground radar repairman is, because I can tell that by the name. So I was like, I'm going to choose that. My recruiter's like, you don't want that. I'm like, I don't. He's like, no, choose this. I'm like, well, what's MAGTF Planner? He's like, I don't know,
Sounds
but it
cool.
sounds cool. And I'm like, it sounds cool. And so I'm like, all right, you sold me. And so that's how I became it. And so yeah, so I'm my primary MOS is MAGTF Planner. And so, as they always say, you can tell it's a very pogue job is when they have to throw in specialists at the end
Yeah.
of it. But I enjoy very much the idea of it. And my MOS school is at a Joint Base Little Creek
Hmm.
over near Norfolk,
Hmm.
Virginia. And so it was actually really nice, because when I was getting ready to leave MCT and everyone was getting ready to leave to go to their MOS school, they were saying like, oh, guys are staying at Camp Pendleton, or and then they said, guys that are going to 29 Palms, like, yeah, don't change over to your alphas, because it's gonna be like 110 degrees outside. Just stay in your camis. And I was just like, well, see you suckers. Like, I'm going to Virginia.
Yeah, have
So,
fun. Yeah, Virginia Beach area is
yeah,
nice too. I've been up to Little Creek a few times to a couple of the courses that they have at EWTG Land up there.
yeah, but that's where MAGTF planners are, EWGT land.
Yeah, that's it's funny. That's a small MOS. That's a very small MOS. I've only met a
Yes.
handful of MAGTF planners. Shout out to my buddy Jeremy Fisher out there. He we were on the Mew together. He was the Muse MAGTF planner, and then he's an officer now.
Mm-hmm.
He went over and did the MESEP program. So shout out to that guy. So what made you decide to do the reserves rather than active duty? What was like your driving decision behind that?
So that was just mainly because my parents still wanted me to go to college.
Okay.
And so I said, well, here's a compromise. I can go to college now while doing reserves, and it was also just because I really wanted to do the Marine Corps like right then and there. But like I said, my parents wanted me to go to college sooner rather than later, and so I said, well, okay, well, here's a compromise. So that was still very much in the mindset of, okay, I wanted to follow my parents' advice and do college. Of course, it was all for naught because I dropped out 2 years later to work full time in journalism. But I mean, the reserves, it's a nice gig, I guess you could say. But I enjoy it. There are still some parts of me where I thought, okay, well, maybe I should have gone active duty, because if I did, I wouldn't have done a MAGTF planning, just because obviously I could have picked whatever I wanted, because I wasn't constrained to location. And so looking back on it, I definitely, if I would have gone active, I would have wanted to do something like combat camera.
Oh, okay.
Since I was still very interested in the news back then, I just didn't know I wanted to make a career out of it. But if I would have seen like that option was given to me, I would have wanted to do that. And I've tried to, since then I've tried a lap move into that, but unfortunately there's no combat camera or anything like that in there. The only really places that I've seen that are consistent is over down at Marfort Res,
at the headquarters
down in the headquarters, the headquarters for all of the Marine Forces Reserve, and then there was like one BIC open at some Air Force base in Fort Worth.
Yeah, that would have been a cool job. I considered that as well, like when I was first coming in. I'm kind of glad I didn't do it, because it seems like a lot of it is doing like retirement ceremonies and like doing a bunch of dumb stuff, you know?
Sure.
However, I do remember when I was in Sangan in 13, we had a combat camera guy come down from MEF and get attached to us for a week. And I'm like, dude, this guy, I mean, I don't know if he stayed at MEF all the time or if he traveled all the time, but I'm like, this guy gets to come out, see the craziness of Sangan for a week and then go back to Leatherneck and hang out and then go out to his next whatever it is. I was like, that's pretty cool, It's one of those jobs where you can definitely experience some interesting things if you get into it.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of concept with what I do now in terms of covering these protests and riots. I mean, you're documenting history, and, and that's very important, because obviously, especially out when you're out, out in the field and out in the country like that, if no one sees it, and that, it's kind of hard to relay what happened aside from eyewitness accounts. But obviously getting that video or getting that photo documentation just makes it that much easier to disseminate and let people know, hey, this is what happened and this is why people do what they do, or what have you.
Yeah, I wanna talk about your coverage of the protests and stuff like that. Before we get into that, though, it's funny. I'm a journalism major actually at San Diego State University. I'm a journalism and advertising both. And I've told multiple people, I'm like, you don't need a degree to do this. I'm like, if you're a good writer or a good photographer and you just have a portfolio, you just got to get your name out there. I'm doing the degree because it's, the GI Bill's paying for it. There's really no reason not to. And it gives me the opportunity to do something like this. I can set up this podcast and do this. So what made you decide that, one, I think being a journalist is awesome. I think it's and what you're doing is great. Being able to travel across country, covering these protests and stuff like that. And like I said at the beginning, for me, most of my news comes off of Twitter and from individual reporters rather than I don't understand the people that focus on one like news network, like, oh, I'm a Fox guy, oh, I'm a CNN guy. It's like, okay, why don't you be a news guy and just kind of follow a few trustworthy news sources and stuff like that. So for your coverage or for you getting into journalism, why did you drop out of college and to pursue it, and how did you like get into the business for people that may be trying to break into that?
So I worked for a political organization back in 2015. It was Turning Point USA at the time, and so they had a blog, and they wanted writers for it, and I was working for them in their warehouse, building stuff and what have you. And so they were like, "Well, Julio, do you know how to write?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Do you want to write for our blog?" I'm like, "Sure, I can give it a try." And because my only quote unquote official education in journalism was taking a semester class for my senior year of high school, just because I needed to take a course to fill out because I had already completed all the graduation requirements, or the classes that I needed to take for graduating. So I just took that as as a one-off, and so that was literally my only really like I said, formal education. I didn't take anything like that in college. And so I actually traveled with them to the Republican National Convention in 2016, and that's when I really got my first taste of covering protests. And there was no riots there, but things got kind of rowdy a few times. Alex Jones appeared, and cops had to come in, and so it was a little crazy. And so then I was like, okay, well, send me to the Democratic National Convention in Philly, and so. I went over there, and it was really different because, it was a bunch of Bernie bros that were really pissed off because, they thought, Hillary and the establishment really screwed them over. And so they were protesting the DNC, and it was really funny because I actually got video with those protesters chanting at the Philly cops for them to arrest Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
but they weren't Trump supporters. They were Bernie Sanders supporters. So I just thought that, because everyone's so focused on, oh, well, Trump's telling her to lock him up, and Trump supporters will lock her up, and then you have these Bernie Sanders supporters saying, arrest Hillary. So I thought that was funny. And so then after that election season was done, I then went off to college and went to Indiana Wesleyan. It was my sophomore year. Went to community college before I enlisted in the Marines for 1 year, and so then decided to want to go to real college. And so the election season came, and then Trump was elected, and then I saw. I stayed up late on election night, and I saw the reaction that was happening on college campuses. Obviously not mine, because for those that don't know, I was located in Marion, Indiana, which is a deep red area, and so there's actually celebrations on campus that Trump won. And so, but yeah, I was seeing college campuses in New York and California and other places started to protest, and I thought, oh shoot, like. This is going to continue. Like, this is going to be a very interesting time with Trump in office, because it's Donald Trump. And so if the campaign was any indication. So then the next semester, I really started to look into opportunities to write out here in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I got a fellowship at Independent Journal Review before the spring semester ended. And so while I was in the process of getting it, I only snagged the interview. I hadn't even done the interview yet, but I knew that as soon as I secured the interview for the position, I told my school, like, hey, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
I just walked into whatever office, and I say, they're like, oh, like, no, I'm not coming back. They're like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah. And so then that about a week later, I then had to come back home in Illinois because I had drill that weekend. And so that's when I told my parents. And I told them, hey, this is what I want to do. And, if it doesn't work out, then I can try a few more options. And the last resort is, okay, I just start college again, the next year. And so, presented them, my main plan, and then I had several backup plans. And so surprisingly, they were like, okay, like, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And I'm like, oh, well, you guys have been telling me to go to college all this time, but I guess, having this backup plan was nice. So yeah, school ended in April. I then moved out to DC, in the DC area, in May of 2017, and I've just stayed out here ever since. And then it just kind of been hooking and jabbing from
just traveling around.
Because, well, I didn't really travel at the very beginning because I was still very much trying to establish myself. Because I had about a year and a half worth of writing experience just prior to that, and that's part of the reason why I got hired full time And so, and like the very first major protest slash riot that I covered was actually Charlottesville in August of
Oh,
2017.
really?
So I was actually there. Yeah, I was actually there, and a friend of mine who was working at USA at the time, USA Today at the time, he told me about a month prior. He's like, "Hey, man, you ever heard this Unite the Right rally?" I'm like, "No, what is it?" Like, "Oh, it's supposed to be Richard Spencer. They're gonna like have a rally or something. There's gonna be some counter protesters there, so like it's on a Sunday." I'm like, "Okay, I got nothing going on there." And so he really like undersold it, but also just because I'm pretty sure he didn't know just how crazy it was gonna
Yeah.
get. And so when we finally got there, we took my car out there, and we arrived, and we were just like, "Holy shit, this thing is just getting out of hand really
Yeah.
fast," and it did. And so I learned a lot of lessons with that in terms of really being prepared for things to really develop, and that's served me well since then. But no, Charlottesville was the very first thing that I covered since when I first moved out here, and then there had been, a couple protests. You had the Women's March, you had the March for Our Lives after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, and up until recently, fairly recently, all these are just protests that are fine. Like they're protesting peacefully,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. That's great. And so this season of unrest that we're in is just really kind of taking me aback, because when I first went to Minneapolis, I legitimately thought that it was just going to be contained there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was only going to stay there. And I can understand, when you look at the video with George Floyd and all that, like, I can understand why people would be upset about that. And so, but then I remember it was on that Friday of that first week that the riots took place. I was then saying like, oh man, like Los Angeles is popping up, New York City is popping up. Oh shoot, CNN is being attacked by their favorite peaceful protesters. Like this is,
I remember that.
and so yeah, and then Minneapolis finally popped off about an hour later when they tried to enforce the curfew that first night, when they implemented it. So I knew that things were going to be crazy with Trump being in office. I just didn't realize how crazy it was going to get. And then
Yeah.
you obviously have coronavirus and all of its effects, and then you have the election on top of everything.
2020,
So it's just
man. 2020 is a mess,
it's
right?
I did not think I would look back on 2016 fondly, but that's what I'm doing now.
So you
'Cause,
you write and report mostly, I mean, from what I've seen on your resume, for mostly all conservative outlets, like openly conservative outlets. Do you find
yeah,
and I don't find, whatever, that's cool. And I actually appreciate an outlet that is like, you know, honest about their opinion. Like, hey, we're conservative. Like Daily Wire is
yeah,
openly conservative. You know what I'm saying? Like, whereas on the other side you have like
yeah,
Vice News where they try to say they're unbiased, impartial news or impartial news, but rather they're not. They're very left wing. But they're not actually coming out and saying it. So, do you think that working for a openly conservative, like political kind of, I guess it's not a political outlet, but you know what I'm saying, like a more conservative style outlet, do you think that takes
yeah.
away like some of your audience? Like people are immediately going to not listen or not read your writing or see your reporting at all or not believe it because you're on one side of the political spectrum? And how do you deal with that as a reporter or an up and coming like journalist?
So the reason why I'm working in conservative media is because, one, I'm just conservative. I mean, that's just what I am, and on top of that, it's just there's a reason why conservative media exists, and the reason why it exists is because it's what you pointed to earlier in the fact that you have the rest of the media, which is largely liberal. And sure, you have a few that, Mother Jones, Salon, Slate, maybe Vox to a certain extent, but they they're they have some where they're open about their liberal bias, and that's fine because at least that that's what you're getting. But then you have the rest of the media like
Mm-hmm.
CNN. You have MSNBC or NBC, not MSNBC is the one that's open about it. But yeah, you have these other news outlets that try to be like, oh no, we're objective and we don't have a bias. You had Chris Eliza, who works at CNN, say, reporters don't root for a side. And
Yeah.
if you just look at their social media, that's not true at
Yeah.
all. And then if you look at how they cover things, it's not necessarily, everyone wants to talk about fake news, and yeah, sure, there are some actual fake news, but the real problem with media is not that they're making stuff up, although, like I said, that sometimes happens. It's just that it's how they frame
Mm-hmm.
it. It's very much how they frame it and how they cover it, and that's how you can tell. And like you said, people don't appreciate that, and that's why conservative media exists. In terms of having resistance to it, so when I'm not doing protesting coverage or riot coverage, I do write from a conservative perspective because that's what our audience is, and obviously that's what I believe, certain tenets of it, and I think that that's important because again, there's the reason why they want that type of news is because they're tired of what the alternative is.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, and this is something I'm very, very, very serious about, that when I'm covering protests or covering riots, I don't insert my opinion on it as it's happening. I just simply hit the record button and I just film, and then I tell people, hey, this is what's happening. And like, that's
Mm-hmm.
it. I don't try very hard to not put my own spin on it, and I like to think that I don't. Uh, After the fact, that's when I do analysis on it, and that's when I can throw my opinion on it because okay, like this is what I saw, and this is what I think of it. But while it's happening, I don't do that,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why people appreciate that because then you have places like MSNBC in Minneapolis where Ali Velshi was standing in front of a burning building. And he said that this is a protest, and it's not really
It's mostly
unruly
peaceful.
as the riot, right? And as rioters were fighting with the Minneapolis cops, and I know that because I was there and I actually saw him when he gave that report. I just obviously didn't know what he was saying because I wasn't paying attention to him. I was paying attention to them throwing fireworks, them throwing rocks, and then the cops shooting tear gas back. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had CNN in Kenosha saying that it was fiery but mostly peaceful. And again, it's just like that's not what's happening. And so, part of the reason for my audience that I have gained this past summer is just because I've been told repeatedly in messages and comments on Twitter is that like, hey, we really appreciate that you're just telling us the facts on the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and like that's and again, it was what I said earlier about documenting history is this that yeah, like because people just need to know that this is what's happening. And there are obviously some people who don't want the actions of rioters to be recorded because that obviously doesn't paint them in a good
Yeah.
light. And my thinking is just that if you're gonna commit crimes out in public on the street, you're gonna have to be okay with being recorded because again, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, be there if that wasn't going on, and so. Yeah, obviously, I have not gained a fan club from the Antifa type side or any of the Black Lives Matter crowd because I'm going to report whenever their side does things bad, as I would report if cops are being too aggressive, and I can actually attest to that because I got shot with a rubber bullet in
Oh, dude,
Minneapolis
how'd that feel?
it sucked. It sucked ass. It was really. But obviously, that was an example of police being too overzealous because I was trying to avoid getting hit, so I wasn't in the crowd. I was actually off to the side on the sidewalk
Mm-hmm.
because the two sides were in the streets, and so I was like, okay, well, I'll just put myself in the middle right here, and I'm off to the side. I'm obviously by myself. I have my press badge on. They should clearly tell that I'm no threat to them. And that wasn't the case at all. So I got shot, and so I reported that. I'm like, hey, look, the Minnesota State Police, I believe it was them. They shot me, and that's not cool. Like I'm not.
This is not what I wanted to happen.
And then on top of that, the previous day, I actually reported that some of the Black Lives Matter activists were trying to prevent. This was during the day. They were trying to prevent some of the more Antifa types and the agitators from fighting with the cops. So the reason why I reported that is just simply because that's what happened.
Yeah.
I don't. The only thing I care about is the truth and the facts of what's going on, and that's going to involve agitators and rioters fighting with cops. I'm going to document that, and I'm going to document when cops are being too overzealous when it comes to them cracking down.
What a crazy concept where you're covering both sides of the story, like, oh my God, like I can't believe someone's actually doing that. Do you find like I was saying before on, I love watching like your videos and like Andy Knows videos and stuff like that because, he's the same way. Like, he does a thing where he just puts the video out there. It's like, hey man, I'm not putting any kind of spin on it. Here's what happened. Here's what I saw. Or, he reposts some of the other reporters that are going out and doing some of these riots and stuff like that. And I know he's had a lesser presence in like the Portland and stuff like area and stuff like that because of he's becoming more well known and is open to attack. Are you seeing stuff like that? Are you, as you're becoming a normal face in these protests, are you seeing, the same faces from some of the protesters around, and are people starting to recognize that, who you are and what you do?
Not really. Just mostly for the fact that, because obviously we're in the age of coronavirus, so everyone's wearing masks.
Okay.
But I mean, even before that, I mean, so I do see some the protests here in DC. There's a lot of the same faces, but they don't necessarily travel from like DC to Seattle or Portland. Not to say that doesn't happen, because actually in Kenosha, cops arrested a van that came all the way from Seattle.
Yeah.
So that does happen, but it's not. I mean, just from what I've seen, it doesn't happen very often. But again, I just can't say definitively, just because everyone's wearing masks, because one, they're trying to hide their identity, but also because of coronavirus. So it could. So I just can't just say with like it's not a yes.
Yeah.
It's not a hard yes.
What do you do when you're out there and you get confronted by someone that doesn't want you like filming, what's happening?
So my job is to not. I mean, my job is not to fight them. I don't want to fight them, because and the thing is that people, because obviously Andy got a lot of notoriety and he got a lot of fame off of being attacked, but obviously he suffered injuries, and so I've been accused by some people of wanting to be the next Andy to get attacked so that I can get all this fame off of that. And it's just like, no, I don't want to be attacked. Like, that's like that, because one, then that prevents me from doing my job. Number one, my job is to, as I said, just report the facts on the ground. And if I get attacked and people start, pushing me away from where this action's happening, then I can't do that. And so that just from that fact, no. Two, getting hurt, in a serious way is not worth the clout and not worth the fame that comes off it. That's not, I rather be known for my work than being attacked. So, in the few times that's happened, I've just de-escalated it and I just walk away, just because I mean they can be very aggressive, and oftentimes I'm by myself, and so there's all these people, and it's actually pretty funny because whenever I've like recorded American flags being burned, like there was one example outside the White House on the 4th of July, there were a few people who were like, "Hey, Marine, like what? You're just standing there, you're not trying to save the flag?" And I'm just like, look, I'm surrounded by 50 people who would beat my ass if I try to take that away. And also, again, that's not my job to try to save the American flag from these people, because that is their right to do that. And so that if I were to just take that away from them, then I'll become known to them, and then I wouldn't be able to actually go out and record future events like that. So that's just not my job. Now, that's not to say I won't defend myself, because obviously I am a Marine. I'd like to think I can. I mean, I'm only a tan belt in McMath. Just full disclosure.
Basic killer.
Right. And so I'm willing to defend myself, but that is very much a last resort, and that's something I don't want to do. Just because if you get too famous, and because then you get accused of being a white supremacist, which is like, okay, I'm Hispanic, okay, that doesn't make sense, but whatever. Then I can't go out and report future events just because I'll be too well known and too well lied about by saying, oh, he's a Proud Boy, or he's this fascist right wing crazy nut job, which is just not true.
It's like they've done with Andy now.
Yeah. Just like, I hate white supremacists, and white supremacists don't like me because, again, I'm brown. So it hasn't reached that point yet, thankfully. And I do realize, again, just because since I am willing to record the anti-police people acting violent and willing to report that, I do realize that there might come a point where it's probably best for me to no longer go to these types of things. But I mean, we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But it might come sooner rather than later than I'd like to admit.
It
But
happens, man. Uh,
it happened. It's just kind of the price of fame right
What
there.
kind of in all these protests are you seeing any kind of similarity in tactics by the rioters that are? First off, I want to distinguish that I am totally pro protesters, peaceful protesters and stuff like that. I'm totally for that. And the
Yeah,
rioters
for sure.
are different people. And like you mentioned earlier, there are peaceful protesters on both sides that are like telling the agitators on their side to fucking stop. Like, hey, stop throwing shit. Stop doing this
Yeah.
because you're making us all look bad. So I just want to put that out there that I recognize that, and I think more people ought to. Now with the rioters and stuff, is there any kind of like pattern of weaponry that you're seeing or escalation against the police that you're seeing? Like, how are they? We're seeing everyone on TV. You're seeing these people build their own shields, come out with with the claim or
Yeah.
not claymore, the mortar style like fireworks and stuff like that, and tossing those. I've seen pictures of one of those mortars that they found that someone had shoved like nails and stuff in it. That the police had found. What kind of those things can you describe and tell for like the audience here, like that may not have seen that?
Yeah, so there is very much. So when it comes to Antifa groups, there is coordination on a very. It's very much on a lateral level
Mm-hmm.
because there's no
There's no
real
formal
there's not like
organization.
there's no like national formal
Yeah.
organization. I would say I haven't seen any. Well, I should say I haven't seen any evidence of national, but it is very much. And this is what I find pretty fascinating about them is just that they're very well organized at like a platoon or a company level. It doesn't really go anything beyond that. Again, from what I've seen. And so, they have their groups and they have their other groups that are aligned with them. And so, there is definitely organization within these types of groups, and so they have tactics where they build their shields out of plastic drums, out of
Mm-hmm.
anything, basically anything that they can find. But we're seeing that spread because I mean in Portland, obviously, I mean if it's a day ending in Y, they're rioting, and so they've definitely really have gotten really good at writing.
Yeah.
just because the DA is not going to be charging a lot of them, and it's really like catch and release over there, so they really
Yeah.
don't have to face any consequences unless they do something really bad and they get
Yeah. They're not
caught.
even setting bail
And
for these
so
guys and girls.
right, or and if they are, there's a huge bail fund waiting for
Yeah.
them that's being sourced from the local community, from all sorts of places. So they did the leaf blowers
Mm-hmm.
with the tear gas canisters, which was then really funny because then in Portland I saw this at the federal courthouse. Instead of firing these small little canisters, they literally came out with like this big fumigator
Like a
or like this
fog
giant.
machine.
Yeah, it was like a flamethrower, but obviously instead of flames, it was just tear gas. So it was just like
Jeez.
you see this just like hosing them down with tear gas, and they're trying to fight back with their leaf blowers, and of course, since they're trying to save the planet, it's like electric, so the battery dies, and it's not as powerful as like this giant
That's funny.
fucking tear gas maker. And so we're seeing kind of copycat tactics like that in places. I mean, we saw quite a bit of this in action in
Mm-hmm.
Rochester, where again they would have their shields in the front, they would have people in the second line throwing stuff, and then they'd have the third line of people having the leaf blowers, and then the people behind them would be like the medics. So I mean, they're organized, and they're very much, and it's very much spreading. And I saw a little bit of this. I would just traveled to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, this past week. I wasn't there for the one night of riots. I was there the next day, but I could see some elements of that where again some people brought
Mm-hmm.
shields, leaf blowers that I saw, but they are. It's just a very loose organization, but when they are able to find that common enemy, whether it be the local police or the federal police or federal law enforcement agencies, um, they become very very well organized, and so it's just pretty interesting. I find the whole thing interesting. And in Kenosha, I saw that in Kenosha as well. I saw a few leaf
Yeah.
blowers. it's very, very interesting to see how because they disseminate their
Yeah.
instructions through social media and through secure group
They've
chats.
pulled a lot of stuff from Hong Kong and the protesters there, and I really do not like the comparison of the rioters and stuff here in the U.S. to what the people are rioting and protesting in Hong Kong. It's like,
Yeah, it's two completely different things because I mean you have the protesters in Hong Kong waving American flags and talking about like, hey, America's great, and then you have the rioters here saying death to America. I mean, I recorded that in Kenosha. This them setting American flags on fire and chanting death to America and kill the fucking police.
that's crazy.
And so they've adopted the same tactics, but obviously they have very different goals.
Yeah.
And so I don't like this. It's just not comparable in terms of their end.
So where's the next place you're going, man? Wherever they send you, huh?
Wherever I find interesting, and that's what I like about Town Hall. They're very supportive of it, and they like they very much provide that support to send me out anywhere, and obviously they want to keep me safe, and obviously I want to be safe as well. So that's also something to consider. And so it's just a matter of wherever. And like I said, I didn't really expect this to continue for so long. And I came back from Minneapolis and I was resting because I was still recovering from being shot from the rubber bullet. I mean, because basically, it's actually I have it right here.
Oh shit!
So this is the type.
That's huge.
This isn't the exact one. Yeah, no, this was the exact one I got hit with because obviously I wasn't trying to find it because I was trying to run away. But it's a 40 mic.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just the non-explosive version of it, and so actually I got very lucky with it because this was before I had any ballistic vest. I wasn't wearing a cup. I wasn't wearing a helmet. I didn't have any goggles on. I was literally just like this, just wearing just the clothes that I had. So if it shot me anywhere else, it would not have been a very great injury.
So that completely changed how you go out to protest. So now you wear all those things.
Yes, I have a gas mask now. I have, like I said, I have a ballistic vest. I actually got rifle plating because my current vest is only rated for handguns. But then because I was at the scene of the second half of the shooting with Kyle Rittenhouse, and so he was firing off rifle rounds, and there was shooting too, and so I was thinking like, oh shoot, like if I catch a round, this is probably not going to be enough. So I have rifle plating now. Got a cup.
That's crazy, man, that you're prepping, you're wearing the same gear that you're given in the Marine Corps to go to combat, you're wearing that same style gear to protest here because of the possibility of violence and stuff like that. Like, it's insane.
Because I'm too cheap right now, I actually do bring the helmet that supply issued by you.
Dun, dun, dun. It is what it is, I guess. Well,
it's getting more use out of it than just sitting at home. I get, and I'm trying to protect my head.
For sure, dude. For sure. I know you're on a limited time here, so we can go ahead and wrap this up. So people can find your writing and your work. You're a senior writer over at townhall.com, correct? And is that the only place that they can find your work, or do you have your own independent website as well?
No, they can just find it there. I guess my other website would just be Twitter.
Okay.
Julio_Rosas11, and that's where whenever I go, that's where I live tweet any of my wherever I travel, and then obviously just shit post dank memes on there as well sometimes.
Hey, we all got to do that, right? Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're busy. Like, just hearing your story, talking, I was in Philadelphia this day, and I flew this, like, traveling all over the country, covering these protests. Hey, keep up the good work, man. Keep putting out good content, because I think it's not even just content. It's like, hey, this is what's happening. And I really encourage people that want to know what's actually happening on the ground in some of these protests to get on Twitter and find a local reporter and follow them and see what they're actually reporting, because the 15-second clips that CNN and Fox and everybody else is showing is not full context of what's happening out there. And I think it's unfortunate. That's the kind of news, it's the style of news that we're so used to now, is this like, MSM, here's a 15-second clip with 2 minutes of commentary from 3 talking heads. I'd rather see the raw video like you guys are putting out. So I really appreciate, you risking it and getting out there and reporting from the fronts of the protests out here in the U.S. And I like the insight. I appreciate you coming on and giving me some insight, as a journalism student myself. So Really appreciate that. If there's anything that you want to, any kind of organizations or companies you want to shout out here at the end, feel free to do that now. If not, we can end this.
Yeah, no, I mean, so if the people like my work, you can actually become a VIP subscriber at Town Hall. It's only about like $7 a month. The reason why I encourage people to do that is because that goes towards my travel budget. Because obviously, flying cross country and hotels and rental cars, that adds up. And so if you're able to, and you have the means to become a subscriber, because that is something you can do to support real journalism. And I know that's something that people really, really want. And obviously I understand, I know COVID times and not everyone necessarily has that. So I completely understand that. But you get access to, not only do you have the comfort of knowing that, but you get access to paid walled articles. And whenever I travel, some of my articles are VIP only. Because again, that's what you get when you pay for that. So highly encourage that if you have the means.
Yeah, man, support journalism. All right, dude. Well, I appreciate it. We'll have to link up again in the future and get an update on how everything's going.
Yeah, of course, man.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Yeah,
later.
Thanks.